Chosen one, they tried to discredit you. Now heaven is crediting you. For promotion comes neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But God is the judge. He puts down one and exalts another. Psalm 75, 6-7. Pay attention, because what you thought was a setback was actually a verdict being prepared. What felt like public reduction was private promotion. And before you see it happen around you, you must understand that it has already happened above you. God says, they assume they controlled the outcome because they controlled the room. They believed that if they could influence perception, they could determine position. But promotion does not come from direction, it comes from me. Chosen one, this is what cannot be reversed. When they tried to discredit you, they believed authority was social. They believed reputation was negotiated. They believed influence was decided by agreement. So they whispered. They hinted. They strategically withdrew support. They let your name hang in silence so that others could fill the gaps with assumption. And for a moment, it looked like it was working. God says, it looked like subtraction, but it was selection. You were not being erased. You were being separated. Because I cannot elevate what is still dependent on human applause. I cannot credit what still seeks human validation. So I allowed the tension. I allowed the distancing. I allowed the misinterpretation. Not to punish you, but to detach you. This is Revelation 5, what cannot be reversed. The moment they attempted to lower your credibility, heaven began increasing your spiritual weight. Every false narrative became a documented contrast. Every moment you chose restraint instead of retaliation became evidence of leadership. You thought you were surviving embarrassment, but you were passing qualification. There was a woman in a ministry circle who was gradually excluded after she questioned an unethical decision. She was labeled rebellious. Her spiritual maturity was quietly questioned. Invitations stopped coming. Group messages went silent when she spoke. She considered defending herself publicly, exposing inconsistencies. But instead, she stepped back. She continued serving quietly elsewhere. Months later, internal conflict erupted within that same circle. Leadership credibility collapsed, and the very people who once doubted her discernment began reaching out privately, saying, "You saw this before we did." Her silence had preserved her authority. Her restraint had protected her anointing. God says, that is how I credit my chosen. They thought they were closing doors. They did not realize I was changing buildings. They thought they were limiting your reach. They did not know I was expanding your jurisdiction. And what makes this irreversible is not their regret. It is my decision. I have already shifted the scale. Even now, there are conversations happening where your name is being reevaluated. There are individuals quietly reconsidering their conclusions. There are observers who sense something didn't align with the accusations. Truth leaves a residue, and when lies begin to decay, that residue becomes visible. God says, do not interfere. Do not rush to defend what I am restoring. Do not explain what I am about to reveal. If this word is aligning with your spirit, hold it with maturity. Even your quiet agreement matters. Alignment is more powerful than argument, because this was never just about reputation. It was about rulership. If they had succeeded in fully discrediting you, you would have remained in spaces beneath your calling, constantly proving yourself to people who were threatened by your clarity. I allowed the discrediting to expose insecurity around you. I allowed the pressure to reveal who celebrated you publicly but resented you privately. God says, when I exalt, it is not reaction, it is recalibration. This cannot be reversed because I have already recalibrated your position. The credit you are about to receive will not feel like applause. It will feel like recognition. It will not feel loud. It will feel rightful. But here is what you do not see yet. While I have been preparing your elevation, something has been stirring in the hearts of those who attempted to diminish you. And what they are beginning to feel is not confidence, it is awareness. And once awareness sets in, control begins to slip. And what happens next will explain why their strategy is starting to turn against them. Lean in, because what they are beginning to feel right now is something they did not anticipate. It is subtle, it is quiet, but it is destabilizing them more than they will ever admit publicly. God says, the confidence they once carried about your downfall is thinning. This is where the shift begins to surface, not fully visible, not dramatic yet, but internally undeniable. The same individuals who once spoke about you with certainty are now revisiting their own conclusions. They are replaying conversations in their minds. They are noticing inconsistencies in the story they helped shape. And what once felt unified now feels fragile. This is Revelation 4, what they are starting to feel. At first, it is discomfort, then it becomes doubt. Then it slowly turns into quiet regret, because when truth begins rising, false confidence begins shaking. They may not apologize, they may not approach you, but internally, something is recalibrating. God says, I am allowing them to sense what they tried to suppress. They tried to suppress your credibility. Now they are sensing their own instability. They tried to question your character. Now they are quietly questioning their own judgment. And the weight of that realization is heavier than public embarrassment. There was a woman in a family setting who was subtly portrayed as dramatic whenever she expressed boundaries. Her in-laws would smile politely, but later suggest she was too sensitive. Her husband was influenced by those repeated suggestions. Over time, gatherings became tense. She withdrew to avoid conflict. Eventually, a separate issue surfaced within the family, financial manipulation that had nothing to do with her. When evidence came to light, the narrative shifted. Suddenly, the one who had been labeled too sensitive was the only one who had consistently sensed something was wrong. No public apology came, but the tone changed. The sideways glances stopped. The respect that had quietly eroded began quietly returning. God says, this is how awareness works. It does not always arrive with loud confession. Sometimes it arrives with altered posture, with softened tone, with cautious conversation. You will notice it not by what they say, but by what they stop saying. Chosen one, do not misinterpret the silence that is coming. It is not indifference, it is recalculation. They are reassessing the narrative. They are realizing that what they tried to discredit did not collapse. It endured, and endurance exposes exaggeration. God says, your stability is unsettling them because they expected reaction. They expected you to unravel. They expected emotional outbursts that would justify their claims. But you did not give them what they predicted. And now they must reconcile the fact that their assumption did not manifest. That reconciliation creates internal pressure. You may feel tempted to confront them when you sense the shift. You may want acknowledgement. You may crave verbal validation. But understand this, the shift happening inside them is more powerful than a forced apology. Forced words do not restore credibility. Quiet realization does. God says, let them wrestle with it. Let them sit with the awareness that they misjudged you. Let them process the fact that their strategy did not produce the outcome they forecasted. Because what is forming now is not just regret, it is recognition. And recognition is the bridge to restoration. But do not mistake this stage for completion. This is only the emotional turning. The visible turning has not fully manifested yet. What they are feeling internally will soon align externally. Conversations will adjust. Invitations will subtly reappear. Opportunities will surface in unexpected ways. Stay grounded. If this word is resonating deeply, remain steady in it. Sometimes alignment is simply continuing forward without bitterness. Even your quiet consistency right now is part of the testimony being built. Because here is the deeper truth. While they are beginning to feel the instability of their own narrative, something else has already begun turning in your favor. Something beyond emotion, beyond opinion, beyond perception. And once that turning becomes visible, there will be no space left for doubt. But before that visible shift unfolds, you must understand what has been building behind the scenes this entire time. Stay attentive, because what is turning now is no longer just emotional. It is structural. It is circumstantial. It is positional. What began as internal awareness within them is becoming external alignment around you. God says, "I do not only change hearts, I rearrange environments." This is Revelation 3, what is now turning. You may not have noticed it immediately because divine shifts rarely announce themselves. They unfold quietly, like doors unlocking without noise. But if you look closely, patterns are shifting. Resistance is weakening. The tension that once surrounded your name is thinning, and what once felt blocked now feels paused, as if waiting for clearance. God says, clearance has already been granted. When they attempted to discredit you, they unknowingly set a timeline in motion. They assumed momentum was on their side, but momentum without truth eventually collapses under its own instability. And now that instability is surfacing in subtle but undeniable ways. There was a woman in a corporate environment whose colleague quietly undermined her during performance evaluations. Credit for her ideas was redirected. Her suggestions were downplayed in meetings. Over time, she noticed projects she once led were reassigned. She considered resigning, but instead she stayed consistent and refined her skills further. Months later, leadership shifted. A new director stepped in and began reviewing archived reports and client feedback. Data revealed that the projects she led had the highest retention and satisfaction rates. Without her campaigning for recognition, her performance metrics spoke. She was offered oversight of an even larger division, one her underminer had hoped to control. God says, that is structural turning. You thought the delay meant denial, but the delay was documentation. You thought the silence meant disinterest, but the silence was data being gathered. And now the data is speaking. This is not coincidence. This is recalibration. The same systems that seem to work against you are beginning to expose gaps within themselves. The same people who aligned against you are noticing fractures in their unity. Alliances built on insecurity cannot sustain pressure, and pressure has been applied. God says, I allowed the imbalance so I could correct it without your interference. Chosen one, this is why you must remain steady. When structures begin to turn, the temptation is to celebrate prematurely or confront vindictively. Resist both. Let the turning complete itself. When I restore credibility, I do it in a way that cannot be contested. You may already sense it, a call that felt different, a message that carried unexpected warmth, an opportunity resurfacing without you asking. These are not random gestures. They are signals of repositioning. What is turning now is perception, but beyond perception, it is access. Access to rooms that once felt guarded, access to influence that once felt withheld, access to authority that once felt distant. And when access shifts, everything shifts. God says, I am not only clearing your name, I am expanding your reach. They thought diminishing you would contain you, but containment has expired. The very attempt to shrink your presence has refined your resilience. And resilience carries weight. People trust what survives pressure. If this message aligns with your spirit, hold it with maturity. Sometimes agreement is not loud, it is disciplined. It is continuing forward without proving anything. It is allowing the evidence to accumulate naturally. Because what is turning now is bigger than acknowledgement. It is trajectory. The direction of your path is adjusting. The speed may not feel dramatic, but the alignment is precise. What once felt like detour is becoming shortcut. What once felt like humiliation is becoming qualification. But do not assume this turning began recently. This shift did not start when they felt doubt. It did not start when structures began adjusting. It started much earlier, in isolation, in pruning, in seasons where you felt unseen. And unless you understand what was being built in those hidden moments, you will misinterpret the elevation that is coming next. Do not overlook the hidden seasons, because what you thought was abandonment was actually construction. What felt like isolation was insulation, and what looked like delay was design. God says, before anything began turning around you, I was building something within you. This is Revelation 2, what I was building. You measured that season by silence. I measured it by strength. You counted the days by loneliness. I counted them by layers of maturity forming beneath the surface. While they were busy shaping narratives about you, I was shaping capacity inside you. Because elevation without depth collapses. Influence without endurance corrupts. Invisibility without refinement destroys. So I refined you. I allowed you to sit in rooms where your voice was overlooked, not to diminish you, but to teach you discernment. I allowed you to experience misunderstanding, not to shame you, but to strengthen your clarity. I allowed you to feel the sting of misrepresentation, not to punish you, but to detach you from the addiction to approval. God says, I was building weight in you. There was a woman who left a long-term relationship after realizing she was constantly being subtly belittled. Her partner would joke about her ambitions, question her decisions, make her feel emotionally unstable whenever she expressed concern. When the relationship ended, mutual friends quietly sided against her. She was portrayed as overly dramatic, incapable of commitment. For months, she doubted herself. She questioned her memory. She wondered if she truly had been the problem. But instead of spiraling, she began therapy. She started journaling. She rebuilt her self-trust. She invested in personal development. A year later, when similar patterns of manipulation surfaced publicly from that same partner in a new relationship, clarity emerged. The same friends who once doubted her began to understand. But by then, she no longer needed their validation. She had rebuilt herself stronger than before. God says, that rebuilding was your preparation. You thought the quiet season was punishment. It was preparation. I was strengthening your internal foundation so that when public credit returned, it would not intoxicate you. I was deepening your identity so that recognition would not define you. I was teaching you to stand alone so that when alliances shifted, you would not cling to unhealthy ones. Chosen one, the building happened when no one applauded you. It happened when you cried privately and still chose dignity publicly. It happened when you resisted the urge to retaliate. It happened when you continued showing up with integrity, even while misunderstood. God says, you passed tests you did not even realize were exams. The discrediting revealed their insecurity, but the isolation revealed your resilience. And resilience is what I reward. Because when I elevate you now, it will not be fragile. It will not be easily shaken by rumor. It will not crumble under opinion. You are not the same person who was first discredited. That version of you might have needed explanation. This version of you understands positioning. If this word is anchoring you, receive it deeply. Sometimes the most powerful agreement is silent growth. Continue refining, continue strengthening, continue walking with composure, because here is the truth you must prepare for. The elevation that is coming will not feel like revenge. It will feel like responsibility. It will not feel like validation. It will feel like assignment. And before that assignment becomes visible, there is one final layer you must confront. The original misjudgment that triggered all of this. Because they did not just misrepresent you, they misjudged you. And once you understand exactly what they misjudged, you will never again question your position when heaven begins to credit you openly. Before any whisper was released, before any narrative was shaped, before any subtle campaign to reduce your name began, there was one fatal error they made. They misjudged you. God says, they evaluated you by what they could see, not by what I had placed within you. This is Revelation 1, what they misjudged. They mistook your kindness for weakness. They interpreted your patience as passivity. They saw your humility and assumed insecurity. Because they measure strength by volume, they measure authority by dominance, they measure credibility by performance. But I measure by depth. God says, they did not discern your restraint. You could have exposed them. You could have defended yourself with precision. You had evidence, you had clarity, you had the intelligence to dismantle their claims publicly, but you chose composure, and that composure confused them. There was a woman in a community organization who was often the quiet backbone of every initiative. She handled logistics flawlessly, resolved conflicts privately, and carried responsibilities without complaint. When leadership positions opened, she was overlooked. Louder personalities were chosen. Some even suggested she lacked presence. She did not protest. She continued serving with excellence. Over time, crises emerged: mismanagement, broken communication, public embarrassment. Those who had been promoted struggled under pressure. When emergency restructuring was required, the board reviewed past performance records. Her name surfaced repeatedly as the stabilizing force behind previous successes. She was not only promoted, she was entrusted with rebuilding the entire structure. What they once saw as absence of presence was actually disciplined leadership. God says, they misjudged your silence. They thought because you were not fighting for attention, you lacked ambition. Because you did not argue every accusation, you lacked defense. Because you walked away instead of escalating, you lacked fire. But your fire was controlled, and controlled fire builds. Uncontrolled fire destroys. They misjudged your timing. They assumed delay meant incapability. They assumed obscurity meant irrelevance. But obscurity was incubation. Delay was development, and silence was strategy. God says, I was training you for weight they could not carry. The very traits they underestimated are the traits that qualify you now. Your emotional intelligence, your discernment, your refusal to retaliate impulsively, your ability to endure misunderstanding without collapsing into bitterness. These are not weaknesses. These are governance qualities. And this is why heaven is crediting you. Not because you were attacked, not because you were misunderstood, but because under pressure, you remained aligned. Under scrutiny, you remained composed. Under misrepresentation, you remained anchored. They misjudged your source. They thought your strength came from personality. They thought your stability came from circumstance. They thought your endurance came from pride. They did not realize your source was me. God says, when they tried to discredit you, they were unknowingly challenging my endorsement. And I do not endorse lightly. Chosen one, what is about to unfold will not require you to announce anything. It will not require dramatic confrontation. It will not require vindication speeches. It will unfold naturally. Recognition aligning with record, opportunity aligning with preparation, access aligning with maturity. And when it happens, do not let pride interrupt it. Stay grounded. Stay aligned. If this message has walked with you from the beginning until now, hold it with stewardship. Even your quiet support, your continued presence, your steady faith, these are signs of alignment. Because the credit coming to you is not applause, it is assignment. You will be placed where integrity matters. You will be entrusted where stability is rare. You will be elevated where discernment is required. And the same people who once questioned you will witness your authority without explanation. God says, I do not restore to prove a point. I restore to fulfill purpose. They tried to discredit you, but heaven is crediting you. And when the visible credit manifests, when doors open without you knocking, when influence expands without you striving, when respect returns without you demanding, you will finally understand. It was never about clearing your name. It was about establishing your throne. And what I establish, no whisper, no strategy, no misjudgment can ever overturn.